Great. So welcome everyone. Welcome to our monthly HeartPowered speaking community, HeartPowered speaking community call. And just a quick upfront thing. How do we get these conversations going? Well, in Corona times, people say we need to get closer together. We need to learn from each other. We want to exchange more, more best practices. And we started to build a community called the HeartPowered Global Nation, because we believe everything juicy in life and business comes from heart-to-heart connection. And we should always never forget that we are all a global nation, right? So if you're not a member of that yet and you want to stay updated on what's happening in the community and what inspiring events and best practices we are sharing, here is a link in the chat. Join our HeartPowered Global Nation if you're not a member yet. So in the HeartPowered Global Nation, that's also where we said, hey, we want to bring, a lot of people are entrepreneurs, a lot of people are speakers, and we said, why don't we bring the speakers among us together once a month? And that's what we did. So, we start these HeartPowered speaking community calls. And just in case you don't know me very well yet, I'm the founder of HeartPowered Business. Our mantra is speak up, scale up, impact the world. We've really helped hundreds of clients and people, amazing people like you from more than 50 countries now, to go professional with their speaking and to double, triple, even quadruple their income with our Voice to Millions framework. And I've been a paid speaker myself for more than 20 years. I've been on stages in more than 25 countries on 5 continents. And if you are here to really grow your speaking, you speaking to grow your business further, well, I'll also share my Speak to Scale map in the chat, where you can actually pick up 50 best practices on how you use speaking to grow your business further. However, this session is not about me at all. It's all about you, and it's about our special guest. And, as you know, every month when we come together, we really put this session together because we want our special guest to inspire you to really take away practical hints and tips that you can apply right away in your speaking and your business. You can ask your own personal questions on how to make your speaking and your business flourish further. We are coming here together so you can exchange with other professional speakers. And if you run any kind of high priority project right now, you want the world to know, that's also, we're going to open a little bit of space on sharing that at the end of our session. And I know for some of us here in Europe, it's break time. Also, for our guests in South Africa, right, it's lunch break time. For some of you it's morning, for some of you it's afternoon, evening. Just take a break, get inspired, have fun with us today, and turn your learning from today and the golden nuggets you take away today into, apply them and make your speaking and business fly even more. You can ask your questions anytime in the chat. We will actually have a little bit of space at the end of our time today to also answer your personal questions. And also, as we're recording this, please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Also keep in mind, we are video recording this, so when you're asking a question, you might show up on the video. But I know you're all speakers, you love to be on stage, also online and being visible. So every month, as we said, we invite an expert guest and we cover one amazing topic. And this time again, we're going to talk about the power of storytelling and how you really turn your stories into gold. And you know that speakers use stories to really advance their messages, right? But, however, a well-structured and delivered story, is what you want to create. You want to have a well-structured and delivered story that ticks all the right psychological, emotional, and sales boxes, because only when your story does that, you'll boost your keynote to new heights, right? And I cannot think of anyone more amazing and greater to actually cover that for us and share his wisdom on storytelling with us. My wonderful friend that I invited today, his name is Blokzyl. He's a master story engineer. He's a professional speaker. He's a coach. He's an author of numerous books on entrepreneurial system thinking and strategy development. And in this session today, he will walk you through the various strategic frameworks to crafting your best stories and turning them into gold, right? And a couple of things about Bruce up front. He is a master of strategy. He works with clients all over the world, from his home base, Cape Town, on the issues of sustainability, innovation, and profitability. He's really purposeful, he's driven, that's how I know him, and he brings a huge heart and passion for, capability growing to individuals and communities and businesses in really powerful ways. He has developed amazing models and framework based on his 7 principles of sustainable innovation. And his frameworks are agile, adaptable, and laser focused on whatever you try to tackle in your business in the moment. As we said earlier, he is a professional speaker, coach, author, co-author of quite a few books on entrepreneurial system thinking and strategy development. And he also served as the president of the Professional Speaking Association of Southern Africa, and he sits on a committee at the Cape Chamber of Commerce. And there's so much more to say about you, Bruce, but I would like to really just bring you into the game right now. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We love to have you with us. It's great that you take time out of your busy agenda to be with us today. Welcome.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And good to be here. I bring you greetings from Cape Town, a cold, wet and wintry Cape Town. Remember, we're opposite weather to Europe. So we're in the midst of quite a lot of storm fronts that are coming through. So we had 20 minutes of sun this morning, and now we're back to winter again. So it is a little chilly here.
So it's good that we're streaming online and not from the outside. Okay, over to you, Bruce. Stage is yours.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So, hello. I want to chat to you today a little bit about where we're going with storytelling and what that looks like, and maybe share a little bit of tools and tips and ideas that you can use. So as was said, everything that we do is based on the 7 principles of sustainable innovation. And these are 7 laws that kind of govern a little bit about how we work with individuals and teams and organizations that we have various implementations with and coaching. And a lot of our keynotes that I do is based and kind of operated out of here. So let's just deep dive into number 7. Principle 7 says simply, learn to script, tell, and live your story. It's as simple as that. But it's quite a deep one, because not only is it number 7, so it underpins the 6 above it, but it's a vital part of strategy. And we're going to kind of look at how we can use storytelling as speakers to be able to put forward our strategy, but also it's a means to an end. So we're going to show you some secret psychological tools that you're going to learn, but don't worry about trying to copy everything down. Don't worry about crying, oh, I got to do the screen time. I'm going to give you a copy of my book at the end of the speech, so you can relax and listen, rather write down your aha moments that you get or things that you need to do. And all the stuff that's covered in this short talk is included in my book, and you'll be able to download a copy of that book a bit later. So be ready with your phone, because I'm going to give you a QR code to scan that'll put the book directly onto your phone. Okay, so let's go. Why do we tell stories? Well, there's 5 E's that we find at the intersection of the street. But I just want to pause a little bit. This intersection, I took the names off the roadmap there, of the names. It's interesting, because if you had to speak on a topic, say you speak on productivity, or you speak on endurance, or you speak on human resources or financial management or whatever, that's your one street. It's like New York, you get streets and avenues and where they intersect. So the topic that you speak on all go, and they all lie kind of parallel with each other. And then you get the cross-section streets, and those cross-section streets are the skill set that you have. And it's interesting. So if you are a I was going to say motivation speaker. We don't have motivational speakers anymore. If you're speaking on say, financial management, okay, and you're a finance person and you know how to speak and your topics are absolutely brilliant, you know everything there is to know about tax law and macroeconomics and microeconomics and country policy, and you are a very poor, boring speaker, you're not going to get booked. And if you're an amazing speaker and know nothing about finances, you are not going to get booked. So that interaction between the streets and the avenues, the lanes and the avenues need to be quite important, because at the intersection, that's where we as speakers stand in the middle of that intersection and direct traffic. So I want to take you to the intersection of a street, the corner of strategy and storytelling, because that's the kind of street corner. That's my street corner. That's where I hang out. Don't tell my mom, okay? But that's kind of where I hang out. I hang out on the street corner, the corner of strategy and story. It's really good. And we've got a couple of things that happen around this intersection. This intersection, we educate people. We use stories and strategies to educate people. Sort of like this, but we do quite a lot of education stories. We write a lot of education manuals, and it's all of that. And people learn by stories, don't we? And we're also there to enthuse people, encourage, enthuse, to get people to be motivated to take action. So a good story will motivate somebody and enthuse them, or to emphasize a point. A good story will be able to emphasize or highlight some area, or just entertain. It's great just to have a good story to entertain. I love it when we just have story times. I belong to a global story circle that we get together once a month, and there's no agenda other than just to tell a good story. And it's so refreshing to sit there. You don't have to, I need to wait for the point. I need to write down the action points. It's just pure there to educate and encourage each other. And then we have entice. We always want to entice people to kind of lead them down there, also known as marketing. So I want to entice you to book on my course. I want to entice you to book me for a workshop. I want to entice you to sort of take that next action. So a good story will do one or a combination of these 5 E's. And these stories are found at that corner, strategy and story. Come and visit me. That's where I hang out. And we're going to play a little game there. So let's deep dive into this for a moment and see, when do we tell stories? Now, this is a really interesting thing, because as speakers, we get this wrong. When do we tell stories? Well, the good answer is anytime it's appropriate. And another good answer is never tell stories when it's inappropriate, but knowing where to fit a story in. Now, this had me so confused that I wrote a book. So I've got this thing, whenever I come up with a thing that confuses me, I write a book about it, and then I understand it, and then I can teach it. So I've got a whole lot of books that I've written because I wasn't clever. And now I am a little bit more clever than I was, because by writing a book, you have to do quite a lot of investigation. So I wrote a book on how to structure a keynote. And in developing that, I've got a whole lot of cards that you move around the table and play around with that. And in there, we've got story cards. And knowing, it's only when I'd finished the book and started using the cards that it come back and I was getting my aha moments, that there are various types of stories. So we sometimes start our keynote with a good story, an introduction story. Good morning, my name's Blokzyl. Let me start with a story. It's a story about da-da, and we go on. And it introduces the topic. And these are really good stories, but often they are too long. And if we get a 40-minute keynote and we're spending 15 minutes on our opening story, people begin to realize, are we at a story time or at a keynote? So we must be careful of the introduction story, like 3 to 5 minutes maximum introduction story. And the same thing with a closing story. You don't want people looking at their watches and go, okay, cool. And they go, I just want to end off with this amazing story. Let me just tell you about my last 3 weeks. And so you've got to have very short stories. Everybody can tell a story. Not everybody can tell a good story, and very few can tell great stories. But hopefully we're going to get some great stories out of you through what we've got here. So we've got a main story as well. Sometimes your keynote is a story and we have a main story, and that's perfect. My favorite is the split story. The bookend story, where you'll tell half a story up front. So you tell half a story here and you get to what we call a plot point, and then you do the rest of your keynote, and then you tell a closing part of that story. They're actually one story, but you separate them out and you put in other keynotes. So classic example of that is, I met Jack, and Jack was going through some really hard time with his business, and he just lost his wife and his financial ruin, and he was sitting there with a whole lot of products in his warehouse and he didn't know what to do. So he picked up the phone and he phoned me. Okay, plot point. Then we leave the story there. Then I'll go on and tell you how amazing we are at entrepreneurial coaching. And we do this and this, and here's my blueprint and stuff there. And then go, wow, this is great. Let me get back to that story. Okay, I arrived at the warehouse and we were able to look at all his products, and we came up with a new marketing strategy, and now he's a success. So you can see how the bookend story fits so nicely within that keynote. But you've got to end it off. It's quite hard, and it takes practice for your audience to know the transition between story, keynote, fact, and back to the story. So he goes, remember that story about Jack? I just want to go back. And often if you're at the stage, you'd have a story place where you tell that story from. So you almost X marks a spot. And sometimes I'll walk right to the end of the stage and tell that story there. Then I'll come back to the middle and carry on and go, remember that story, as I'm walking back to that same spot. So your audience have got positional anchors. I've even used it sometimes on screen, where you can move to one side of the screen to the other. A little bit hard now when most of the screen's taken up with slides and stuff, but it's a matter of choreographing, sometimes changing the color. I've got a client of mine that wears this beautiful hat that he puts on the hat when he tells the story, and he takes it off when he's been kind of coaching, and then he puts back the hat to tell further stories. So we've got a number of types of stories, and those types of stories are told at various points within our keynote. So let's deep dive a little bit. This is where we're going to get some kind of teaching, and we're going to go through first of the day. I want to climb into structure, and I want to spend a good chunk of time in there, because that's where the learning is, and that's where we are going to play a little bit. So how do we tell a story? Well, it's kind of once upon a time, isn't it? Well, but maybe it's not, because stories that start with once upon a time are fantasy stories. If you start a story with once upon a time, it could be anything. You could have fluffy flying unicorns and people will believe you. You can have galaxies far, far away and people will believe you. You can bring in Ewoks, and you can bring in Star Troopers, and you can bring in Dr. Spock, and you can bring in the Teletubbies, and all that stuff is believable because it's once upon a time. But as speakers, we don't necessarily want to play around with fantasies. So there's other types of stories. So there's stories that are myths, there's stories that are legends, there's stories that are pure fiction, and then there's stories that are true. Now you can play around with various types of stories and make it very clear that when you're telling a story, you've got to differentiate yourself by telling a fantasy story, by telling a true story. So mostly true stories are started by just the other day. And stories that are started with that is a good positioning story. They're case study stories, aren't they? Just the other day, I was talking to a client about all his products in his warehouse. Just the other day, I was sitting at an office overlooking the beach while we were looking at a strategy for a robotic company. Just the other day, I was working with an education company, looking at empowering youth in the farmlands here in Cape Town. Just the other day. Those are the types of stories that we tell. And if you start a story with just the other day or just this morning or 2 weeks ago, they're true and they're believable. Now, one problem with speakers is we tend to tell a story once, and the more we tell it, the bigger and bigger. It's like the fish gets bigger and bigger, and the facts get bigger, and the joke gets funnier. And so we emphasize the part that people laugh at and all this sort of stuff. So you can then tell a legend story based on truth, but not really true. So legend has it, when I first started speaking, everybody was enthused by my funny clothes, okay? And we can go around those things. But I think there are too many speakers that have lost the authenticity of authority on the stage because they are telling fibs that are perceived to be true. And I'll leave that with you to unpack in your own mind and your own speeches, and hopefully within your own associations, because I think we are leading our customers astray by portraying things that are perceived to be true that aren't based on good research or facts. And then it needs to be a once upon a time story and not just the other day story. So let's dive into a little bit of the purpose. When is a story not to be told? Well, if it's for personal entertainment. Now, we've all seen these speakers. They start laughing when they think about their story because it's a personal ego journey, isn't it? So they go off, I must just tell you about it. I just can't believe it. You're my wife, Charles. She's such an old bag. You just won't believe. And I tell you, and I must just go on and on. But yeah, my kids, I got a slide of my kid here. Look at this. This is, and you sitting going like, what are we at a cocktail party where we telling, personal stories, or are they sitting on the stage and they're supposed to be the sage on the stage at a point of authority, but they are entertaining themselves with their own stories? Now, again, are we wasting our audience's time and our clients' money? If so, do not tell the story. If your story has no value towards your outcome, cut it out. If it is distracting and sidelining, cut it out. And often, probably 3 out of 5 stories that I hear in speeches or working with people developing their speech are cut out completely. The other 2 are modified dramatically. So often stories, it needs to be a means to an end, and we need to move that story. If the story is moving your audience towards the desired outcome, then you can keep it. So story should be directing your audience, adding learnings into this, prompting actions, and showcasing the outcomes. That's a good story. And if it meets all those criteria, then keep it in your speech and take it to that next level. The characters in a story. Now, a good story always has a hero and a princess, because that's the classic story that we want. But he met her, they lived happily ever after, does not make us a good story. It is boring. We need some friction. We need tension points. So we introduce the third person, a villain, and we have the hero meets the princess, but he's blocked by the villain, and he has to learn new skills and overcome his hardships and defeat the villain. Then he can be with the princess, and they live happily ever after. So I must just pause here now, because I've been asked, why is a hero and a hero male and the princess always the one that needs to be rescued? It is not. These are non-gender specific characters. They are more archetypes. You need a hero archetype, a princess archetype, and a villain archetype, and they don't even have to be people. The princess could be financial reward. The villain could be the government. It could be conflict. It could be economic downfall. It could be the weather. It could be all sorts of things. Your hero might even be the product offering that you are selling. So don't think that for one moment that the hero has to be this guy dressed in, army blues with medals and a nice haircut and a six-pack, and the woman has to be blonde with high heels and a short skirt, and the villain has got a scar across his left cheek and with a twitch in his right eye. Those were great for some movies, but true stories are not always like that. These are not fantasy stories. These are real life stories. But using the 3-character principle in that triangle creates such a lovely tension, and we are able to play and move around with it. Once we've got our 3 characters defined, well, then we can start looking at supporting characters. And we remove all unneeded characters. And we also want to focus a little bit on our other characters. So I just want to zoom in quickly into that character wheel. And I've kind of made it my own here by creating little archetypes around there, again, non-specific, but they're just to highlight those sort of people. So there are 12 different main characters, supporting characters that you'll find in every type of movie. You'll see there, they have emotion attached to them, plus an outcome. So if you're looking for a character that seeks freedom or independence, then you would go, well, I kind of want something understanding. So you would introduce a sage character there. But on the other hand, you're wanting kind of connection and belonging, and you want intimacy out of that, then you would introduce a lover character into your mix. And you've got the caregiver and all the different things. So it's a lovely little character wheel. This is in your book, so you don't have to copy that down. You'll get a copy of this wheel. And it's a great thing. Not mine. We've just enhanced it a little bit to play with it. But often I get stuck with different characters. We pull out the character wheel, and I've got them in card format, and we push them around the table when we're developing things like marketing strategies and product developments. And we want a sage in there, but we also want a kind of a caregiver as part of this product offering. So we use them at multiple different levels. All right. Time to catch your breath, because here we get into the deep, dark formula of what we're doing. So there's this thing called the hero's journey. Now, this is not mine, and there's even debate on where it comes from. But yeah, I've got Michael's name there, and he's kind of accredited because he wrote mostly about it. But the origin is kind of one of those composition things that happen. It's one of the great formulas for a good story, and it's so good it's used in probably 80% of movies that come out of Hollywood. A lot of people write screenplays, a lot of people write stage plays and books and short stories based on the hero's journey. It's a 3-act play, and they've each got different kind of focuses in there, but the key thing are the plot points. There are key plot points that happen. What is a plot point in a story? A plot point is when your story is going along in a direction, something happens, and the story plot changes in one direction. Now, we've all had this happen to us in our own lives. We can be involved in an accident in our motor cars, and our life changes. Plot point. We can get a phone call about a loved one. Plot point. We can get fired or employed or get a contract to speak on a big stage. Plot point. We can have that cancelled immediately because of COVID. Plot point. And all those things change our lives both positively and negatively, but there is change. So plot points are key. They create tension, they create anxiety, and they create emotion into the story. So we've got there at the bottom here, this is the hero's journey, but I want you to focus a little bit about what's in the circle there with a smiley man, because this is my own formula that we've created for not only keynotes, but marketing strategies and product development strategies and stories. And it's a wonderful formula because you can kind of sing it. Now, my singing voice is not the best in the world. No, I do not have a singing voice, but it goes like this. What is, what, wow, what if, what now, why no, why yes, how now. And it's such a wonderful thing, and it's really good. So I want to unpack this for a little bit, but give me kind of 10 minutes to play with this and understand. So I'm going to go through the different areas, and I want you to just think about how your last keynote or your last training program or your last conversation where you had to persuade somebody to do something, because we are edu-change agents, aren't we? So we're in the business of edu-changement. So we entertain, we educate, and we change, but ultimately speakers speak to change. So how do you change people's mind? You can force it, or you can encourage it, or you can get them to empower the change within themselves. Which is sustainable? Only the third one. So the best way for sustainable change is to get your audience or your clients to change within themselves because they want to. How do we get them to do that? We empower them to do this. How do we do that? By using this formula. So here we go. What is? We start off every good story with an opening sentence, and we say, this is the current status quo. All right. What that does, for each thing, I'm going to dive off a little bit into the psychology. So bear with me as we go there, because understanding how people's brains are working as we go through the story is vitally important, and you'll see how it goes there. So what is? Just the other day, I was reading the newspaper about the conflict in Europe, okay? The weather systems in the North Atlantic, the elections in the USA. Whatever it is there, we have to bring people into a point where your audience can see themselves in your story. And we do that with what we call experiential hooks. So if I tell you a story about living in rural Africa in a hut where we had to go and walk 2 kilometers to go get fresh water every day and come back, and there weren't any toilets. In fact, we had a toilet. It was called a spade and newspaper. And that was, you are going to sit there and go like, I don't have any experience in that. And maybe some of you have been on safari, and maybe some of you have been there. It's not how we live, okay? But you wouldn't have any connection with the story around that. I could tell you how I was chased by hippopotamuses up the bank of a river. And you're going to go, well, I kind of watched The Lion King, but I don't really understand it. But if I told you, well, let's just speak about conflict in Ukraine, and then I can tell you a little bit about how the conflict in Central Africa is similar to what the conflict is like in Ukraine, because it's fought over the same agenda. You see, now you have experiential connections, even though you might not know or live in the Ukraine. Everybody knows about the conflict in Ukraine. So you've got that experiential hook. Now you can see yourself in that story. Now I can bring you into my story. So I've reached out and I've grabbed you by the hand gently, and I've brought you into my story. So this is why soap operas are so addictive. Worldwide, we have soap operas that run for years and years and years. I think EastEnders in London have been going for, I don't know, 100,000 episodes or something ridiculous. Why? Because we see ourselves in that story, and we identify not only ourselves, but evil Aunt Mildred is just like that person, and my husband and my wife and oh, my kids are just like that. And those are the conversations that we have. And that's why we sit there at 4 o'clock around the world, everybody, all the husbands and wives that are able, they stop and they turn on the telly, propensity to watch the soap operas because we have this addictive drug, mostly because of just law number one. What is? We are able to identify. So you've got to identify with your audience. So you've got to know your audience. You've got to know your topic. Research. Don't just rock up on the stage and think you can use the same story you used yesterday because it was a different audience. Know who you're talking to. Reach out. Now that you've got them, now what you've got to do, you go to the next step. What wow? So emotionally, we want to take people way off the chart. Imagine if. Okay, you see where we're going now. Imagine if the world was different. Imagine if we could eradicate poverty throughout the world. Imagine if we could reduce homelessness and education and unemployment. Imagine if we could solve all those problems. Now, it sounds exciting. It sounds great. You lower the tone of your voice. You lean in. You're including people. And now your brain goes, yes, but. Okay, and this is where you've got to get that timing right. They say in comedy, timing is all about timing. Okay, and this is really interesting because as you raise people off the charts, we know it's unbelievable. It's almost a fantasy story, but we're going to reduce them back down and say, but what if we could just address one family every single day in Central Africa? Okay, so we said, imagine if we could do this. What if we could just do this? So you're allowing the brain to breathe in, but then refocus on a certain amount. Now, how do we do that with good stories? Well, we lead people into the thing. We show them the big problems. We show them the conflict. Can you imagine if we can do this? Little Red Riding Hood was walking through the massive forest, but she was focusing just on picking fruit and taking apples to grandmama. Okay, so you can see we set the scene and then we help the brain focus in on a certain path. And that breathing in and breathing out allows the brain to refocus in on your new purpose where you're taking the people and you're taking your audience. And then we give a call to action, our first call to action, but it's not a call to action specifically, but we say, to achieve this, we need to do this. And now we've got that inclusivity. You see how we change it. This is a story. Now, what do we need to do? This is the what now. If this was a part in your speech, you could stop telling the story now and go into, let me show you my blueprint. Let me show you my story structure. Let me do all these little things. So it's the what now. And you can go through, this is where you put in your 3 or 4 steps. This is where you add in your structure. This is where we do. We got this and this and this, and we've got all our offerings. And we might throw a case study in here, another short story, which will be a point story, and we can add that. Now it's very important because a lot of speakers that I've seen stop right here. And we go, okay, scan the QR code and let me know when you're ready to do this. And people go, nah, I'm busy, I'm tired, I'm going to go get lunch for the kids, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, and that. Because our brains are really interesting animals, aren't they? Our brains, no matter how much enthusiastic you could go, like, I've got chocolate brownies fresh out of the oven, come with me now. And you go, oh, do I have to get up? No, I've got to go. Oh, how much are they going to be? Oh, no, you know, how many calories do I have to eat? All of it now? And even that goes free. Yeah, chocolate brownies with ice cream. Come now. Yeah, well, I don't really think I have time. And this is our brains, because what our brains do, our brains function is survival. And surviving It knows what to do to survive in the current status quo. So change for the brain is its number one enemy. Have you noticed that in yourself? Is, oh, we're going to go join the gym. We're going to start a new diet program. We're going to start a new exercise. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to spend an hour writing every single day. I commit to this. Yes, we're going to do, but I'm not going to get it done. And we don't do it. And we might do it for 2 or 3 days because our brain's going like, okay, I'll entertain this, but nah, it's a stupid idea. Okay, why? Why are you going to gym? It hurts. You get all sweaty. And why you want to exercise? Oh, do you have to eat rice cakes? What about the chocolate cake? And so our brain goes back to the status quo of where we are, even if it's unhappy. So your brain can be happy being unhappy. We see that in broken relationships. We see that in money management. We see that in employees. We see that in management styles and over and do that. So as a speaker, as an edutainment, what do? We dive into this darkness. This takes skill. This takes courage because you've got to bring your audience back. So often I will get off the stage at this point and I'll go walk into the audience. And I'll go put my hand on someone's shoulder and going like, so you're probably thinking that this is not in the budget and it's going to be a whole lot of money. Well, you're probably thinking this is going to be a whole lot of work. Some of you are probably thinking you might lose your job because we're going to implement this in the company, don't you? And some of you are going to think, well, okay, it's going to be hard. And yes, your muscles are going to be painful for a bit, but it's going to be rough. Okay, so time, budget, and resources are the number one enemies that your brain will use. Now, if you allow your audience brain to accept and adopt a negative thought, there is nothing you can do. I don't care how warm and fudgy the brownies are and how creamy the ice cream is. You will not get your audience to change. You will not be able to push them to that point where they are going to commit to anything. They've rejected your story. They have rejected the change because your brain has held on to a negative thought. It's too expensive. It's too much effort. I do not have time. And so going there with your audience through a story, you can tell an example story. Great time for a case study story here. Let me tell you about Jack again. We arrived at his warehouse. Remember Jack? And he had a warehouse full of products and the overheads was just killing him. But you know what we did? We cleared out half his warehouse and we leased it out and he paid off all his debts in 6 months. And that allowed him to focus on new product development and new marketing strategies. So what I've done is I've gone into the negatives place, the why no, then we go the why yes, and we bring people back. And then we go, yes, what are the steps we can do? Because once you shine light into a dark space, darkness has no place there. And a good story will be like a bright spotlight into a dark corner. So be brave and courageous as a speaker or a trainer and take people to the darkness in their minds, shine a light and bring them back. Okay, step away from the darkness, come back to the light, okay? And you can then allow the person to change at their free will because you haven't told them they need to change. They have decided for themselves that they want to change. And now there is nothing you can do to stop them wanting to buy from you or taking the next step or starting a movement. It's classic human nature leadership. All right, there's no magic trick involved in this. There's no magic formula. There's no NLP. There's no manipulation. It is allowing somebody to come to their own conclusion and get to there. And now all you have to do is explain how now. And it's really interesting because often people at this time need to be handheld. There's a weird science study that says when we go online, we go back to primary school brain. Have you noticed that? Have you ever sat in front of a website and going like, I don't know what to do. Where's the submit button? Just scroll down. Oh, there it is. Okay. And we get into, you must see me trying to book airline tickets. It's pathetic. A 7-year-old shouldn't be booking air tickets. When I try to book air tickets, my 7-year-old brain comes to the front and goes, I can't do this. You can try to organize food for a convention. just bring your own food. It's just easier instead of getting Bruce to organize. So you often have to tell people what to do, when to do it, and how to go through the various steps, what to do, how to do it, and when it needs to be done by at the end of that thing. Again, a good case study story is great for that. Okay, so that's the story structure. I'm aware of the time and I want to get through. I want to introduce you to a new friend of mine. This is Max. Max sits in the middle, Max the monkey. On Max's left-hand side, there is Brian the fruit bat. And we got Crystal the mysterious, the mystical cat. Now, these three characters were created for me, by me, with AI. So I went into ChatGPT and I said, write me an introduction story about a fruit bat. And it came back and we playing around with it. And AI said, yeah, Brian's got this friend, Max the monkey. And I was going, that's a flippin' good idea. Okay, what other friends could he have? And we're having this conversation and now there's got to be like this sage thing. So we introduced the cat Crystal. And then I went into Leonardo AI, the drawing tool. And I said, draw me a picture of a blue fruit bat in a leather sports jacket. Okay, and Brian came out and I said, draw a friend of his like a monkey. And out comes the stuff there. And now I'm writing these books and I'm getting quite addictive. They're not thick books, they're quite thin books. They're 5,000 words. I limit myself to 5,000 words. Why? Because that's the attention span of my audience. I'm writing these for youth and adult entrepreneurs. So what it is, there's a series of books. This one, Brian the Fruit Bat, introduces the three characters. And then I'm using the power of story of Brian and Max and Crystal, that they live in this rainforest, Muhacha, in mid-central Africa. It's a fantasy forest. It's not a real place, but they go out and they face dangers. There's a volcano, there's a flood, there's a famine, there's issues with the monkeys, there's issues with the elephants who come in and trample the fields, and we've got all these issues, but they liken, the story is a metaphor for what is happening in real life. And then the second half of the book is a business model that's explained that Crystal actually told the others to use. So we do pest analysis, okay, environmental assessments, and we do SWOT assessments, and all these things that we do in business stuff, but we do it through the eyes of a fruit bat. And this response has been overwhelming. I'm now translating these books into 3 different languages. They're translated into Russian, and they are going to Ukraine for the misplaced youth. There's a whole lot of youngsters. There's been news stuff about it. I can't remember what label they had there. But there's a whole lot of youngsters that have been removed from families and stuff. And now Brian the Fruit Bat, translated into Russia, is going into the Ukraine. We've translated them into local Afrikaans. We've translated them into some of our other languages in South Africa. And they are going out. I want to get them into French and Portuguese for East and West Africa, and to be able to translate and push these stories in. The power of stories told through the eyes of a fruit bat to enhance entrepreneurial skill set in youngsters is so, so powerful. So watch this space. I'm on book number 4 of 22 at the moment. I'm trying to churn out 1 book every week and a half and to get them done. So by the end of the year, I want a full set of library of Brian the Bat books. The power of story to change lives are profound. And I just wanted to share that little little thing because I'm having more fun. You see, they say if you don't have fun, how can you expect other people to follow you? And clearly I am having fun. So that's Brian, my fruit bat. He's becoming quite an intimate person. Right, here it is. Bring out your phone, scan that QR code, and the Architecture of a Great Story ebook. It's about a 90-page book. It'll be on your phone. If you can grab that and capture that, then let's go. Those of you watching videos can pause the video and go get your phone now. The live people have to get that and sort that out. I will bring it up again in a moment. So if you didn't quite get it now, we will do that. I'll also put the link in the chat a bit later, but I also want to give you the opportunity to go read this book at your leisure. Please feel free to share it and give it away. It's not a book that I sell. I wrote the book so I could understand stories, and it's just right that I share that with everybody else. So that's a free gift from me to you. If you do want to chat to me about creating your engineering stories, I'm available, and you can get hold of me. I'm available on most places. In fact, right there, you can scan and go to my LinkedIn. I put the little code here still for the book. There's the book. There's the book. Get the book. And the other one is for my LinkedIn. I would really, really encourage you to go find me on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn, write me a wonderful recommendation, and let's speak on LinkedIn. I am finding, thanks to Monique, that LinkedIn is really beginning to work for me. I always thought LinkedIn was just Facebook for adults, where I put my CV and look for a job, but I really want to encourage you as a speaker, as a edutainment person. LinkedIn is definitely becoming one of the key tools that is not only getting me exposure, but bringing in me money and paid jobs as a speaker and a coach and a facilitator and a trainer. And we are finding some good stuff there. I must just remember to post stuff on a regular basis. And that is where we're at. Right, and that is me, done and dusted. We've got a couple of minutes for questions and conversations. If you want to come and chat, I will unspotlight me and put you back all on the screen. There we go. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Wow. Okay. I'm sure that, and I had a look at the comments, and, everyone, yay, I see a lot of applause already. Bruce, you would get a standing ovation by now, if you're physically in a room. Yay, Doug is even getting up. Okay, perfect. So this is the perfect timing for all of you. I know that there's probably a lot of questions in your mind that you'd like to ask Bruce. So we are opening the space right here, right now. Remember, Bruce is a very busy man, so if you want to, you're going to connect with him on LinkedIn, obviously. But what questions are coming up? Is there anything I didn't? Yeah. So Doug is having a question, but you have to leave to get to work. Well, Doug, we are recording this. If you want to share your question, at least you can share your question. Anu is raising your hand as well, so Doug, you can put your question into the chat, and we will bring it up. But Anu, why don't you come and join us and share your questions with Bruce?
Great. Thank you, Monique. Thank you, Bruce. That was such an amazing presentation. I think that the highlight for me was that part where you talked about the why no, and then how to bring into the why yes. So I just wanted a little more clarity on how that transition actually happens. Like if you could just give like a concrete example, perhaps.
Okay, so Claire, and I use this everywhere, and it's a really, really effective tool. So if I was standing on a stage and I would be implementing a new software protocol to be rolled out into an organization, and they've hired me to motivate from the stage and then act as their change champion. So typically I would do this in a number of ways. If I'm purely speaking, I would pause and I'm going, we're going to be implementing X, Y, Z in this company, and it's going to affect the finance department and marketing. And so these are real life things that I've done before. And you can see people, they fold their arms and start leaning back. And that's when you want to lean into them and you're going to go. So some of you are probably thinking, that it's going to cost you your jobs because you're going to be made redundant. Some of you are probably thinking, no, I don't have time for this. You probably say, and as you get more experience in objections, instead of ignoring them and hoping they're going to go away, you actually embrace them. And as you hear more and more questions, I'm always amazed at why the reasons people come up with. And instead of saying, anybody here got any negative thoughts? And everyone's going, I'm not going to talk because if I'm going to put my hand up, I think I'm going to get fired. The manager, line manager at the back's taking names. Okay. And people get fearful. So you embrace that with them and you walk. That's why I actually get off the stage and I walk out into the audience. If I was doing this in a coaching environment, I would actually have a tea break right here and I'll go, let's have a 15-minute tea break. And I'd come back and I'd get a flip chart and I'd put a big T on the flip chart. And I was going to go, right, let's write down all the reasons this is not going to work. I'll start with 3 and I write them down on the left-hand side of the line. And then people, we fill sheets and sheets of paper because once you give the freedom to speak negatively, they just overflow into that. And then we have another short break and we come back and say, right, now let's do counter actions. How do we get the money for this? How do we get it? And how do we, you see there, you've come up with a negative thing. We are solving it. And at the end, if you've got a positive for every negative and you say, are you ready to change? The brain's going, okay. And it's as easy as that. It's stepping across that threshold. It's leaping off the cliff blindfolded. It's so easy if you've addressed that negativity of the brain.
Okay, thank you. Very, very, very insightful.
Right. Okay. Anyone else? Just unmute yourself, speak up, or put it into the chat. Doug had a question, but he had to leave. So, okay, he speaks on suicide, such an important topic.
That's a powerful story. Yeah, I do a lot of NGO work with people that are working with vulnerable kids and hurt adults and displaced people and stuff. And it is so important to be able to use this in the power of stories. Tell me your story. And you preempt and you tell stories with people and you lead them through that same formula. And ultimately, if you don't like your situation, reframe it and tell a different story. But you can't tell people that. You've got to get them and say, let's just tell this differently. What if your story could be slightly different? And now you're taking people through that change thing. So you can get people to do that. And all of a sudden, like, I don't want this anymore. And people get used to being unhappy. It's crazy. People go from abusive relationship to abusive relationship or bad boss to bad boss until they learn to tell a different story. It's that see, do, get model that they use. And if you don't see a different picture, you'll never do differently, and therefore you'll never get a different outcome. Mm-hmm. So the C is all about storytelling and reframing.
Absolutely. Great. Okay, I see people raving about your session, Bruce. Like Cora is saying, great session. Thank you for sharing all this great knowledge, Bruce, with a lot of exclamation marks. Kadia is saying, very true. Any other questions here, anyone? Or are you feeling like you're just all excited to, roll up your sleeves and, turn into practice and start using it? Yes? Great. Okay, I don't see anyone else right now. I'm very surprised, Bruce, because I think there should be a ton of questions, but
everybody's shell-shocked. Yeah.
Sounds amazing. But thank you, Bruce, for being on with us today. I think a lot of us have been using stories in the past, but I think there were quite some light bulbs switched on for a lot of us, because as you say, you're living at a crossroad or a street corner between strategy and storytelling. And it's so true that a lot of people are not actually speaking to what might prevent people from turning the learning of the story into action and addressing that is equally important in a story, in a keynote. So that will turn around people really using their stories more strategically and also getting people into action. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So Bruce, you want to round it off with a final encouraging message or word of wisdom before we round it off?
I think people, it's going back to that law number 7, learn to script, tell, and live your story. You get that right, and the rest of the 6 principles fall into place. But we tend to live other people's story. We tend to not enable ourselves to script our story. And most certainly, we do not live the story that we wanted. If your story needs to be changed, reframe it, rescript it, and relive it, and make the changes. And I think as speakers, we enable others to do that around the world. So it's time to maybe tell a different story. Beautiful.
Beautiful, powerful message around off. Thank you, Bruce, for being on. Thank you all for being on. And, go out there, rewrite, relive, relove your stories. Make a big impact with what you've lived through, because it will be an inspiration to many. And as we said, be part of our HeartPowered Global Nation. Share with us any additional questions, anything. Tomorrow we have again the opportunity for you to share with the community of what are you cooking up, what are you creating, and again, turn your learning into action from this session with Bruce today. Definitely connect with Bruce, definitely secure his book, right? Again, go dig into more detail about all these powerful golden nuggets and how to craft powerful stories. And and we see you again at another HeartPowered Speaking Community Call in July. And we already have a really hot guest coming up, as hot as Bruce. And I think it will be a really logical continuation of what Bruce spoke about today. Next month, we will talk about how you use language to turn, intentions into action, right? How do you write solid marketing copy? And I think it goes so hand in hand with storytelling and story crafting as well, Bruce. Thank you all for being on with us today, Bruce. Thank you all for being here. Investing your precious time. Hopefully you get some light bulbs going, right? And some insights on how to craft more powerful stories. And we will be in touch in the meantime in our HeartPowered Global Nation, in our Business Power Tribe, and in other ways. All the best for now, my friends. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.